The mirage of representation, why Black women's political victories don't equal power. Good morning, everyone. I stand before you today, profoundly moved by my recent conversation with Danielle Hicks, a visionary advocate whose tireless work has illuminated the complex realities behind the headlines trumpeting Black women's political advancement. Danielle isn't just documenting progress, she's redefining how we measure it. Through her groundbreaking research and fearless advocacy, she has forced institutions to confront uncomfortable truths about representation versus actual power. Her ability to translate data into compelling narratives has awakened countless communities to the difference between symbolic victories and substantive change. What makes Danielle truly extraordinary is her refusal to accept surface level metrics as evidence of transformation, a perspective that has fundamentally reshaped how we should think about representation, power, and the genuine path forward. Let me start with something that might surprise you. In 2024, we witnessed Angela Alsa Brooks and Lisa Blunt Rochester become the first two Black women to serve simultaneously in the U.S. Senate. The headlines exploded with celebration. Social media platforms overflowed with congratulatory posts. Political commentators declared a new era had dawned. The narrative seemed clear and compelling. Barriers were falling, progress was accelerating, America was healing its historical wounds. But here's the disturbing reality Danielle Hicks helped me understand. These victories, while genuinely worth celebrating, mask a far more troubling picture. No Black woman has ever served as a U.S. governor, not one. 34 states, more than two-thirds of our nation, have yet to elect a Black woman to any statewide executive office. None. The pipeline to the highest levels of leadership remains painfully narrow and fraught with nearly invisible barriers that nonetheless function as concrete walls. This creates what I call the mirage of representation, the dangerous, seductive illusion that because we see advancement in some highly visible areas, the system itself has fundamentally changed. It hasn't. We're witnessing exceptions that prove the rule, not evidence that the rule is changing. We've been conditioned to celebrate firsts and milestones, and absolutely we should. These achievements represent extraordinary individual determination. But we've confused symbolic victories with structural change. We've mistaken representation for power. And in doing so, we've allowed ourselves to become dangerously complacent about the profound work that remains. Think about it this way: when we see Black women breaking barriers in politics, we naturally assume this reflects a broader shift in opportunity and access. It feels good, it looks like progress. But what if these visible successes are exceptions that prove the rule rather than evidence the rule is changing? What if these hard won victories are happening despite the system, not because the system has been transformed? This pattern repeats across sectors, from corporate America to academia to entertainment. We celebrate visible representation while the underlying power structures remain largely unchanged. The faces at the table may look different, but who controls the agenda? Who allocates the resources? Who makes the final decisions? Those questions reveal where power truly resides. Let me share three key insights from my conversation with Danielle that illuminate this phenomenon with painful clarity. First, historic progress does not mean the work is done. Yes, Black women have achieved unprecedented representation in state legislatures. They reached a record high of 401 state legislative seats in 2025, a remarkable 67% increase since 2014. That growth reflects a decade of intentional pipeline building and relentless advocacy. But zoom out and you'll see that despite these gains, Black women remain significantly underrepresented in top executive roles. The higher you go in any power structure, the fewer Black women you find. This isn't coincidence or chance. It's by design. Systems were built this way and they continue functioning exactly as intended. The second insight is even more sobering. Policy reversals can erase gains overnight. In 2025, we witnessed the collapse of federal DEI initiatives, which led to over 69,000 federal job losses. Many of these affected Black women in administrative and leadership roles. Black women, historically overrepresented in federal employment, faced sudden layoffs and loss of workplace protections as these programs were dismantled. Progress that took decades to achieve was undone with the stroke of a pen, with little public outcry or resistance. This reveals the fundamental fragility of progress without institutional safeguards, without laws, policies, and cultural norms that protect and advance equity. Gains remain vulnerable to political winds and inevitable backlash. The third insight offers a path forward. Building and investing in leadership pipelines is essential. Sustainable change requires intentional investment in developing Black women leaders at every level through mentorship, organizational support, and policy advocacy so that representation grows from the ground up, not just at the most visible levels. Let's look more closely at these dynamics through real stories. Consider Angela Also Brooks and Lisa Blunt Rochester, who made history by becoming the first two Black women to serve simultaneously in the U.S. Senate. Their achievement is extraordinary, but the path they traveled reveals persistent barriers that remain largely invisible to most Americans. Both faced entrenched political networks that weren't designed with them in mind. Both encountered significant fundraising gaps that required innovative solutions. Both confronted skepticism about their electability in statewide races that coded language that often masks deeper biases about who looks like a leader to the American public. Their success required mobilizing grassroots support, building broad multiracial coalitions, and leveraging national organizations dedicated to advancing Black women in politics. In other words, they had to create parallel systems of support because the existing ones weren't serving them. Yes, they broke through, but the very fact that their victories were historic in 2024, more than 150 years after the first Black man entered the Senate, tells us something profound about the pace of progress and the persistence of barriers that remain for Black women specifically. Now, let's examine what happened with the collapse of federal DEI initiatives in 2025. Black women historically turned to federal jobs for stability and advancement, relying on affirmative action and DEI policies to counteract workplace discrimination. When these protections disappeared, the impact was immediate and devastating. Advocacy groups and affected professionals organized to bring attention to the inequities, push for policy reversals, and develop support networks for those impacted. Their efforts raised national awareness about the consequences of rolling back equity initiatives and galvanized new coalitions for workplace justice. But the damage was done. Careers were derailed, financial security was threatened, and a powerful message was sent. Progress is provisional, conditional, revocable, especially for Black women. This brings us to our third story, which offers hope amid these challenges. Black women reached that record high of 401 state legislative seats in 2025 through strategic partnerships between organizations like Higher Heights Leadership Fund and the Center for American Women in Politics. These groups focus on candidate training, mentorship, and resource allocation. This decade long effort to track, support, and amplify Black women's political leadership across the country has created a stronger pipeline for future leadership roles. These gains laid the foundation for future breakthroughs at higher levels of government, demonstrating the effectiveness of sustained, targeted investment in leadership development. What these stories reveal is that progress isn't inevitable, it's manufactured. It doesn't just happen, it's built deliberately through systems, structures, and sustained commitment. The appearance of progress can mask the absence of power. Representation without authority is merely decoration. This understanding transforms how we must approach the work ahead. If we recognize that visible representation, while important, isn't the same as structural power, we can focus our efforts more strategically on the levers that actually distribute authority and resources. If we acknowledge that gains can be reversed without institutional protections, we can work to codify equity into laws, policies, and organizational practices that withstand political shifts and backlash. And if we accept that sustainable change requires investing in leadership pipelines at every level, we can direct our resources toward building capacity from the ground up rather than celebrating isolated breakthroughs at the top. The path forward requires both celebration and critique, both recognition of progress and clear eyed assessment of what remains unchanged. It requires us to look beyond the headlines and ask harder questions. Who holds decision making power? Who controls resources? Whose voices shape policy? Whose experiences inform institutional practices? It requires us to distinguish between symbolic representation and substantive power, and to work toward the latter while acknowledging the importance of the former. So I challenge you today, don't be seduced by the mirage of representation. Look deeper, ask tougher questions, demand more than symbolic victories. Invest your time, your resources, your influence in building systems that distribute power equitably, not just seats at tables where decisions have already been made, because true progress isn't measured by isolated breakthroughs or historic firsts. It's measured by the depth and durability of change, by systems transformed, by power redistributed, by opportunity truly equalized. The mirage of representation tells us we've come far enough. The reality tells us we've only just begun. Let's have the courage to see clearly, to speak honestly, and to act boldly in the face of that reality. The time for symbolic gestures has passed. The time for structural transformation is now. Thank you